All right. So if you look at my fingers, all you people on the podcast, I'll describe to you that I have 9 normal-looking fingers, and I have one that's got a white pad on it. And that's because I tried to learn a new skill this weekend. I tried to learn how to solder. And specifically, I tried to use a hot air solder station. And a couple takeaways. Number one, I am terrible at soldering. This is not a skill I've ever been able to master. I have watched YouTube videos. I have practiced on circuit boards. I don't know if I'm using cheap equipment, if I'm not getting it hot enough, if I don't understand the concept of where to put the soldering iron on the board.
Well,
But I did learn not to put the soldering iron
on your finger.
on my little fingies.
I don't know if I have yet convinced my brother to listen to this yet, but as a child, my dad had a soldering iron hot and out and not in the little cradle, and it looks very grabbable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and so sure enough, my brother grabbed it from the business end.
Oh, yeah.
And
the pencil side.
Yeah.
There's some really great stock photography out there that you can tell is done by somebody who also has never operated a soldering iron before.
I can imagine.
And there's more than one, but there's one in particular that I've seen floating around on Facebook recently where the girl's holding it like a pencil, and it's on the business end. And had that thing been hot,
Right.
she would not be smiling the way she's smiling now.
Yeah, I'll admit, and you can check my work too. I have brief moments of soldering brilliance, but 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's god awful. I use too much solder, not enough flux. I get it too hot. I don't get it hot enough. I mean, just all. But every time I do a soldering project, it's like what they say about golf. You go out, you play crap all day, but you get that one shot,
And
the
you're
one
hooked.
hit, and it brings you back.
Yeah.
I do that with soldering. I'll do one, or I'll get on a kind of roll or something. I'll be like, "Ooh, that's beautiful. Ooh, that's beautiful. Hey, come over here, come check." And it looks like a hot mess, and I've shorted it, and yeah.
I also started wrong because instead of just a regular bead of solder on a wire you can see, I tried under a microscope with a hot air station trying to replace about 25 pins on a USB connection to a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to buy a Nintendo Switch just for parts with a non-functional charger, got one, I'll sell you cheap.
There you go.
You are listening to The Soapbox. I'm Paul.
And I'm Eric.
This all started out with a list. What's that all about?
So I've compiled a list over the years of things that just bother me, things that grind my gears. And I shared that list with you.
And I thought, you know what? That would make interesting conversation. Sometimes I'm going to want to agree with you, and it's just going to be something we talk about. Other times, though, I'm going to want to steel man the opposite position because I think that's just interesting conversation.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm always right, but Paul's just a really good debater.
Hey.
Okay. We have our second ever guest on the podcast, Dr. Joe Crabtree. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I would give a fake bio like Paul did before, but that was
With Reg?
yeah.
Do you want me to come up with a bio real quick?
I was going to do something different. I was going to say we are recording this in a building that is in a room that's adjacent to where you got your start here at KTC, right?
That's right. I grew up in Lexington. Went to UK on a highway scholarship, transportation scholarship, with what was then the Department of Transportation. It's now the Transportation Cabinet. When I graduated, got my bachelor's degree in '78, and went to work for the Highway Department. And they sent me to Frankfurt to the Division of Technical Computing, and I did Fortran programming for them. But I also received a National Science Foundation fellowship to go to grad school. And so the DOT gave me a leave of absence to go pursue my master's degree. So I went to school full-time, got my master's degree in a year. August of '79, I got my master's degree and was ready to go back to work. And instead of sending me back to Frankfurt, they sent me here. They sent me to the Division of Research, which was here on UK's campus. And I actually was in this building in the office right next door here, and worked in the traffic and safety section for about 3.5 years. During that time, the Division of Research got abolished and became part of the University of Kentucky, which also released me from my the remainder of my scholarship obligation. And that's when I left to join the Navy. Served as a nuclear propulsion officer in the Navy. Worked in the private sector with Mobile Chemical for about 4.5 years, and then came back to Kentucky in '92, and was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to come back to the Kentucky Transportation Center. So I've been back here since '92, which is what, 32 years.
You're telling me that 1970 wasn't 30 years ago?
Yeah.
So with all that, and being that Paul and I are both in the transportation world, it would make perfect sense for us to talk about something transportation related, something safety related.
How about video games?
Let's just pivot and talk about video games. Because
With all the expertise in the room here, I feel like maybe we could produce something amazing, or we could produce something incredibly fun.
Yeah. Let's go with fun. And you said Fortran. So take us back to what were the first early video games?
What got you hooked?
Yeah.
And go with as deep of a deep cut as you can remember.
I consider myself very blessed, very fortunate to have grown up when I did, because I was here at UK in the mid 70s. I came here in the fall of 74. Again, got my master's degree in August of 79. So that was, if you go back and you do some searches online as to the earliest video games, that's the era. And I didn't really start with video games as much as computer games. They had terminals here in the engineering complex at UK that connected to mainframe computers. There was one, I forget the name of the one here at UK, but there was a DEC 10 computer in Louisville, and you could sit down at a terminal and connect to those computers, and you could play games on those. And they were obviously the very basic initial games. Most of them were text-based. They call it interactive fiction now, but where you're presented with a scenario and you type commands and then it comes back. So you're basically walking through a story, and by your choices and the commands that you give, you determine the direction of the story.
And no graphics, right?
No graphics at
text,
all.
Yeah.
There was a Star Trek based game that had a real basic graphics that would print out. They would show the location of your starship and the location of enemies, what sectors they were in, and you could fire photon torpedoes and all that kind of stuff. But those games required a lot of imagination because there was no video. But they were so much fun. And I think at that point I became kind of enraptured, if you will, with what computers could do for games, just for entertainment. And I loved it. I've loved computer games. I've always loved programming. I love things that are logical and sequential, but I love to play games, and I was hooked on computer games from that point. And I've always been. Unfortunately, if you're a professional and you have a career, you don't have all the time that you would like to have. So I've always been torn, wanting to. I would actually, during all my years at KTC, I would take that Christmas break when we'd shut down between Christmas and New Year's. And that was a one time in the year where I would give myself like a 48-hour period to just binge
Yeah.
on video games. And I've always loved them. Now that I'm semi-retired, I have to be careful. But I have more time to play if I want to play. So I have to find that balance.
For those playing at home, take a drink. The siren. Sorry. We created a drinking game from the podcast because of all the sirens that happened. So
Yeah, so don't listen until at least after lunch, and preferably after 5 p.m., right?
now you'd mentioned Adventure was one of these early games, because I remember that. My brother's gonna kill me because he probably remembers it way more detail. But I remember we got stuck in it, or we couldn't finish it, or something. Wasn't there a real crux to that game, and you had to go get a key and unlock. I mean, it was a puzzle.
Yeah, it was. And that was kind of at the heart of these earlier games, right? The text-based games, the interactive fiction, is you had to solve puzzles all along. You had to, and I discovered a couple of years ago that you can still find a lot of these games. I found a website dedicated to interactive fiction. In fact, I was looking at it last night to refresh my memory. And there's a lot of these games you can still play. I played one a couple of years ago called City of Secrets. And it's all about that. It's all about mystery. It's all about puzzles. You pick up a clue in one part of the city that you got to use somewhere else. You talk to different people and they tell you stuff, and then the information they tell you becomes useful later on. So I never finished any of those games. I enjoyed playing them, but I didn't have the time to invest to really, walk all the way through and solve all the mysteries. But yeah, I think a lot of people got stuck. and Adventure and Zork, I think, was another one, and these text-based puzzles.
Yeah.
Do you find that you've got any urge now to, not just from a nostalgia standpoint, but also just a completionist standpoint, to maybe sit down and get that finish now that you've got a little bit more time? Or have you moved on?
Yeah, not really. I'm not that driven to finish games. I haven't finished that many in my life. I've just enjoyed playing them. The first video game that I ever finished was Obi-Wan. It was an old Xbox game, and I played all the way through that. And I remember getting into that and saying, I think that's the first game I've ever completely finished, because again, I never really had the time to do that. And then I finished one of the Call of Duty games, the Big Red One, I think, is where you walk through a bunch of World War II battle scenarios. But I'm not as driven. The ones that take a lot of time and a lot of effort to go around and find clues and then apply those, I'm not as driven to finish those, just because I don't know that the time investment it justifies the reward. Justifies the amount of time I would have to invest to do that.
There are a lot of 100%ers out there that just when they play a game, we work with one. Keen has told me, he likes to get the 100%. He wants to collect all the things, get all the, and I'm with you. I especially when it's cosmetic.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and sometimes you get punished. So I'm behind. You guys are playing all the really graphically intense, cool games with the Xbox and the PC gaming. I only recently got a PC in my home that can run any of these modern titles. My old PC was around 10 years old at the time that I replaced it. And my kids are young. But I got rid of all my old games. I had a fantastic collection. Milk crates full of Atari all the way through probably Nintendo 64. So retro, but modern retro. And it was just aging out in my basement. It wasn't getting played. It was cumbersome to set up. All the controllers had wires, and
probably hard to find the video adapt RCA to plug them in.
Now, your brother makes a thing. Mm-hmm. That might be worth shouting out there. It's Blissbox or 4Play or some silly name.
Yeah, my brother is very when he plays a vintage game, and most of them are emulated, I suppose, but he wants to use the original controller. And the buttons are in the right spot, the tactile, the feel, the response, all of that. So he set on a task, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now, to find a way to convert all those old analog devices to USB. And sure enough, you can pick any controller from Atari to Coleco to
very obscure ones.
Yeah,
and it all works with the one widget that you plug into your TV. So I appreciate that. I think that's pretty cool. That being said, with emulation being an option, and also just wanting to clear up my basement since I'm working on my house, sold the whole collection. And didn't buy a video game until I'd finished my master's degree. And it was my reward to myself, because I knew I would, if I had it, it would be a distraction. So I just didn't. But then as soon as I got that master's degree, I went out and bought a Nintendo Switch, and that way I can play with my kids and love it.
But does it emulate? Does it? You have older games on it?
You can, absolutely. Not through emulation, but just they will re-release titles. But on the completionist note there, they punish you sometimes, I think. I played a Mario game, 100%, got all of the secrets and everything, and you're expecting some big ending or some sort of recognition, and it just says, congratulations. That's it. Hours and hours for a congratulations. And then Legend of Zelda takes it a step further. They've got thing that you have to complete where it's very arduous. You've got to get like 400 of these little hidden guys, and if you find all 400, you get a little golden poo. That's it.
So that
and it's almost telling you like you wasted your time, dum-dum. Yeah. What are you doing with your life?
So let's roll back a few decades then real quick, because Joe, I don't know if you had any experience with like the Super Nintendo, like this is where I kind of got into the game, was NES and then Super Nintendo. And I remember back then, no internet, right? So you had to find all those heart containers, right? That was the 100% for that. And I mean, I remember I bought a study guide. I bought a book that told you all the secrets, the Contra code and did you have any involvement in any of those games or that?
I did not. I actually had a Sears Intellivision,
Nice.
which was I guess Atari and Intellivision were the two big competitors at that point. And Atari dominated the market, I think, but Intellivision was actually pretty sophisticated, and it had like Sub Hunt games and Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of that. I mean, extremely basic compared to what we have now, but it had some really fun games. That was probably the first video game console that I owned, and I loved it. I mean, again, it was. Yeah. I was torn because I wanted to spend a lot more time playing video games than I could actually afford to spend, but it was really fun. I thought about when you're talking about playing games on a computer. Did you guys play like Jill of the Jungle and Wolfenstein?
Wolfenstein, sure.
Were on or PC based. Yeah, a lot of my
or even more basic. I think I played a helicopter game on an Apple II that my uncle had.
Okay.
And it was just two colors, and I was fascinated by the fact that I could touch buttons and then make something on the screen respond. Yeah. And I was, I think in that moment I was hooked.
Very first video game, my dad went to Mr. Wiggs, which is a department store on New Circle Road in Lexington, and bought a Pong game. It was just a box, two little like joystick or controllers, I guess, and hooked that up to our TV at home. And you could play Pong. Yep. And that was so amazing to us. I mean, we've never seen anything like that before.
We got a old CRT television secondhand, and it had Pong built in with the paddles in the back.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And my brother and I would, for hours, he'd be the red one, I would be the blue one, and we would just duke it out. And it would often end in an actual physical fight between the two of us.
Yeah. I'm with you. My early, we went in Apple II. My early video gaming was on the PC because my dad got us, we had a CD-ROM before anyone in the, that I knew. It was an external CD-ROM, it was $1,000. But I would get games for it. And then we're lucky too because Bob Mahoney had the biggest BBS, so a bulletin board system. I think it was kind of the pre-internet stuff. And you could dial into this thing, but you have to pay long distance fees to call. Milwaukee was a local number, so we could dial in, and we didn't get long distance charges. And you could download clip art, you could download little games, and that's we were early in that. And the games I remember the most are Police Quest, King's Quest, and then of course for your lewd behavior ones, Leisure Suit Larry. I don't know if you played any of these games, but I was in the bathroom buying a condom at like 9 years old. I didn't know what any of it meant.
Dad, what's a condom?
After you die of chlamydia, you have to start the game over. And
your gaming start was a lot more nefarious than mine. So I was born in '83. Nintendo Entertainment System came out in '84.
Yeah.
And it was just there my entire life. And I remember being a very, very young kid. I was probably 3 or 4 years old the first time I saw somebody playing a Nintendo game, and it was Duck Hunt. And they had the little laser zapper gun. And even as a child, a very uncoordinated kid that doesn't understand plot, can't figure out clues, I could point the little zapper at the TV and sometimes shoot a duck, and sometimes try to shoot a dog that would mock you when you missed the duck. So I think early on, I was more of a console gamer than a PC gamer, but I love the controls of PC gaming. I like, you mentioned Call of Duty. I love Call of Duty games. And you just can't match the precision of, the classic WASD, W-A-S-D, with mouse controller.
Was Wolfenstein I think Wolfenstein was maybe like that.
It was a PC.
Well, yeah, but wasn't it the WASD and then the mouse? Like
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah? Because I want to think that was one of the first.
There was Wolfenstein, then there was Doom.
Doom,
which is very similar. You're running down corridors. I've actually gotten seasick playing some of these games because you're running down corridors and turning corners and all that. And but very similar concepts. I played all those on the PC.
Yeah, those are the early.
Now, I want to pivot for just a moment because now we're sort of entering a slightly more modern age in the timeline here. And the whole format of the show is basically the soapbox, right? What grinds our gears. And you mentioned something offline here, something that really grinds your gears about modern video games. Do you want to set the stage on that?
Yeah, so many of the games really focus on online play, right? Where you multiplayer, you go online and you play against other people. That is a great concept, and I enjoy just the opportunity to play against human beings instead of just against artificial intelligence. The downside is if you're a recreational player like I am, you go into a game and you go online to play and you just get dominated.
You get pwned, right?
Pwned
is the
pwned noob.
You get killed and you don't even know who killed you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and you lose immediately, or, if it's, the one game that I actually tried to stick with and get good at was Star Wars Battlefront 2.
Yeah.
I went online and I played and I enjoyed it, but I always got dominated. I'd end up in the, there'd be like 15 players on each side. So out of the 30, I ended up 28th or 29th. I'd feel good about that because there's one person that finished below me. But you're always playing against people who I kind of express it as that's all they do.
Yeah.
That's their life. And they play video games all the time. And if you're a recreational player, you can't compete. And I've wondered, why doesn't one of these gaming companies produce an online game that is tiered, where if you're a beginner, you get matched up against other beginners. You get assigned a level as a beginner, and then if you win, you move up and get assigned to a higher level, and you're playing against better competition. But you have that option of playing where you are relatively equally matched against the players you're playing against. I personally think that would be much more enjoyable because you'd have an opportunity to maybe win once in a while.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why no one has explored that.
I've seen it played out a couple of times. So another deep cut, I guess an older one, but one of the very first online games that I remember playing is a game called RuneScape. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's an adventure game. It's I would call it 2.5D. It's not fully 2D because you can sort of move along different axes, but it's players versus players in certain parts of the world, and then it's just players versus computers in other parts of the world. But everybody's level is put above their head, and the more you play the game, the more experience you get. The more experience you get, the more I guess fierce you get within the game. And certain areas of the game were only accessible to more advanced players, and so people self-sorted. Usually, occasionally you'd get one of those level 99 players over trying to, just make somebody's day worse by killing you at your level 25 character. So there was some balancing there. A game I'm playing right now with my brother, and this is, I never thought I would say that I would play this game because it just seems so adolescent, but Fortnite. My brother said, "Hey, do you play Fortnite?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, sign up for an account. It's free to play, and let's hang out." And so I downloaded the game, and it was basically like a phone call between brothers where we got to hang out for about an hour, shared experience. And what was interesting about that, I was a brand new player. I knew the basic mechanics of a shooting game, WASD and the mouse and all of that. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't know about. Building and just, what's a good gun?
Right.
Where do you go?
Yeah.
But it would match you up with other players based upon your experience within the game associated with your account. And so my brother, a very seasoned player, was getting very easy matches because he was on a team with me, and their servers were trying their best to sort of balance everything out. And actually, because he was really good and we were partnered up, we won a few matches. And the structure of Fortnite, or at least the matches that we've been playing, 100 players, and you can either do everybody versus everybody or teams of two, in which case you're fighting 49 other teams of 2 players, and there's only one winner. So basically, you can just count on losing most of the time. But because of the game balancing, we actually did pretty well.
I have to tack on one grind my gears to yours that's similar, Joe, and that's the pay to play kind of thing. And I know the more modern games have found ways to address this. There are some games that started off where you could just throw $100 at it and level up super fast and own a bunch of people, but they've tried to balance it and they've made changes to do that. But there's always some level of, like, if you're willing to put money into it, especially a free game like Fortnite, then you'll do better. And I hope to see that kind of go away. But what I'm seeing now is you pay to look different. You pay money. Like my son plays Fortnite. He loves it. And when they launched the new characters, he's like, Dad, it's the Star Wars character. I can be Mandalorian.
For only $20.
For only $20. Can I spend my birthday money on this? I'm like, on what? It's digital. But
yeah, it's an NFT.
It's
nothing.
So I don't know.
Did either of you guys read Ready Player One?
I didn't read it, but I watched the movie.
Yeah, I love the book. It was because a lot of it pays homage to the early days of video games, and I like the movie too, but the movie's quite a bit different. But if you love video games and you love the history of video games, I highly recommend that book.
I wanted to talk about the best video game in the world, and then why is it Jedi Fallen Order?
This is personal preference, and I recognize that. I mean, other people have the right to be wrong on this, but it is personal preference. I like video games with a great storyline that you can follow. Yeah. Basically, there's a campaign.
Yeah.
I like open world, but I don't have the time to just go exploring with no real purpose and have to find a bunch of stuff and whatever. So I mentioned earlier, I like things that are linear and sequential and orderly and logical. Yeah. I like following a story, participating in a story. Jedi Fallen Order has a great campaign. So I love that about it. I love games that have a great campaign that you work your way through, and you always have an objective, something that you're pursuing. And then the other thing about it is it's so much more elegant than a shooter. I've played a lot of shooter games, and I enjoyed a lot of shooter games, and I've worked my way through campaigns in shooter games. But battling with a lightsaber is just so more elegant. Yeah. So much more elegant to me than
sounds like Obi-Wan.
Shooter. And so, Obi-Wan was my first exposure to that. But Jedi Fallen Order, to me, is the perfect video game because of those factors. It's great story, great characters, good versus evil. Yeah. Some twists along the way, but the gameplay itself, the battling with a lightsaber is just very, very elegant.
Now the inputs on this are not the computer controls that we were just talking about, right? You're actually using the sticks on the Joybox or the Xbox controller, the joysticks.
Yeah, you use the Xbox controller, and there are you use different buttons to do different things with the lightsaber, and you can do combinations and all of that. So, but it's something that even a recreational player like me can become reasonably good at, and you can choose the difficulty level.
Yes.
And you can even adjust it as the game is going on. So if you
hit a wall,
if you come up against a boss and you're just battling and battling and battling,
story mode,
you can go back to story mode, get through that boss, and go on. Now I'm hesitant to do that because I do have that. I am driven to complete the game on my own. I don't even like going to the internet for help if I get stuck until I've really, really tried. But there's also a balance there, right? So it's an elegant game to play through, and then very satisfying. When you get to the end, you don't just get well done. The credits start to roll, and I've actually finished the game.
When you get a playthrough, be it with like a purple lightsaber, and like you can play through it a second time, and some of the things have changed.
Yeah. You can do that, and then even once you've finished it, you can go back now and visit places and do additional stuff. So that's really fun. So that to me is the perfect video game, and I've played through that game probably 4 times, and you try it. Bumping up the difficulty level and trying to play it. But it's great. And then, so I was really excited about the sequel coming out when they did Jedi Survivor. And I love that game as well. I don't think it's better because again, Jedi Fallen Order is the perfect video game. How do you get better than perfect? Yeah. But it's a worthy sequel. It's also a great game, and it expands. It's got a little more of the open world concept to it, but it still has a clear storyline that you follow through. So I'm a big fan of those games.
I loved them both, and I wonder too. My situation was unique in that it was the pandemic, so the game came out 2019 or something, but I got it, basically April, May of 2020. So a unique time in our lives, right?
Yep.
We were home. I just got an Xbox. I got it for the game, honestly. I could have played on PC, but something really strange and unique happened. We got the Xbox, and Kristen and I would sit side by side, trade off the controllers. I would usually, she wanted me to do the fighting, and she liked to do the exploring. And it was a nod back to, the early 2000s where Kristen and I would do that on the PlayStation 1. Mm-hmm. We would rent a game from Blockbuster and we'd play through it and trade off it. Because she and I switched to PC gaming, after that in the 2000s. And it was great and I loved it. But, you're back to back in different chairs, maybe even different rooms. It's a totally different experience. So we went from that online multiplayer to in person, in front of the Xbox, like 3 feet away from a TV.
And you feel more connected.
A lot more connected. And we had no scruples. So Kristen would get on her iPad and search where's that container to get another stim pack or whatever, because we wanted that extra health. So
yeah.
We just, same thing, loved the game, but it also came at like the perfect time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I would have played that game today, it would be different.
You're so lucky. In April of 2020, all I got was my third born child.
Right.
So what are you playing through now?
Right now, to keep with the theme, Star Wars Outlaws,
okay.
Which is, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to suggest, because I really enjoy it, but it is open world, going from planet to planet. You got to search for stuff. You have like 15 different objectives going on at the same time. There's a main quest.
So it's a Skyrim in space.
Yeah, it's the same playbook for all these. Yeah, Oblivion and all those. But I really like it. It's there's not a whole lot of stuff to pick up, which I don't know if you guys have that disease that I have. If I play a game where there's stuff to pick up everywhere and you have inventory and you've got a
weight management,
I'm just like, no. This game, you pick up everything you want, use it to upgrade, but you don't. It's not constant, and it's not that where you pick up a cup and you realize it has no value and you're like, darn it. But yeah, so it's an enjoyable game. Doing the same thing. Kristen and I will play it together, and all my other friends are jealous that I can. Kristen will be cooking dinner, and I'll be like, should I fire up the game? Oh yeah, do all that.
See, I am jealous there because I fire up a game and Jenny's like, all right, I'll be on my computer for a bit, but then I want to watch something on Netflix with you. I don't want to watch you play this game. So I do want to pivot one last time. You mentioned that one of the major things that appeals to you about gaming is following a story, and stories are close to you. And I've known this about Joe Crabtree for a long time, yes. Because you have been KTC's unofficial historian. You have made sure to pass down knowledge about Calvin and about just the history of the center. I've known you as a storyteller for a long time, but now it's official because you've got a book that you just wrote, and I want to shamelessly plug the book because I bought it, I read it to my kids, they loved it. But for anybody that may not be aware, do you want to just give a real brief overview about what that is and maybe how it came to be?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. I love to write. I always have. Everybody needs a creative outlet, right? For some people it's music, poetry, painting, sculpting, whatever. I love to write. That is my creative outlet. I've always loved to write. I even enjoyed that part of the reresearch job. I love writing reports. I love, the writing part. And I've always done some writing just for pleasure, but I've never tried to publish anything that I wrote. But I wrote a short story a few years ago that I really liked, but didn't know what to do with it. What do you do with a short story? You try and get a magazine to publish it or something. You can't publish a short story, really. But I got the idea of, my daughter is an artist, very talented artist, and I got the idea of getting her to illustrate it and turning it into a children's book. So that's what we did. And we published it earlier this year, about 3 or 4 months ago. It's called The Kite. It's about a kite and a kite maker. And it's a short story, but it's also a parable. It's a story with a message, if you will. And I publishing it, being able to hold it in my hands, being able to give it to people or to friends, put it in my church library, You know, the Woodford Sun did an article about it, and that's just been really, 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 really enjoyable. So yeah, it's out there. It's The Kite.
We'll put a link to The Kite on Amazon. It's available both in hardcover and also a softback edition as well. So
that is correct, and I'm really happy about it. I love sharing it with people. I love feedback. When people tell me or send me pictures of them reading it to their kids, I think it's a great book for parents, grandparents, school teachers, you know, because it's while there is a Christian message in the book, it's also a message that's relevant to all of us. I mean, it deals with the question of, why do we have rules in our life? Why do parents set rules for their children? Why do parents set rules for their teenagers? You know, which the teenagers often chafe against those. They rebel against those because they feel like they're restrictive, you know, and keeping them from, you know, living their lives the way they want to live them. Is there a purpose behind those rules? And that's what it's true of the rules with parents. Why does God give us laws? You know, those are questions that are dealt with in this simple little story.
You say simple, and I think when you hear, oh, it's about a kite, right? Like, where's the hook there? And I'm always looking for the hook. And as I was reading it to my kids, I noticed, like, all three of them, I've got a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 10-year-old. All three of them kind of stopped fidgeting around and were looking at the pictures and were listening to the story. And it was very engaging. And that was something that I think was a little unexpected, because I don't often get all three of them to pay attention to the same thing at one time. But I think that's probably one of the better reviews that I can give, is that it spans a wide range of interest for ages, and it's just a great little story. So,
and I'll say I didn't read the book, but I did watch the movie. You can only get it at Blockbuster, and there's only the one location now. So
yep. All right.
Yes.
Well,
no movie rights yet.
No, yeah.
No movie rights yet.
I want to play the Kite the video game. That's going to be the fun playthrough.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Do that.
It only runs on Fortran, though.
Wow.
Joe, thanks so much for being on our podcast and for carving out some time today to just have a fun conversation with us. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, pleasure to have you.
It has been a privilege. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to The Soapbox. Eric, how can people find us?
Well, conveniently, we put everything on our Linktree site. You can go to Linktree, search Soapbox Lex, and you'll find all of our socials there, plus ways to reach us, ways to engage, and some of our original content, so you can see some of the other stuff that we do.